All right, good afternoon. I am Lieutenant Amy Cooper with the North Little Rock Police Department Media Relations Bureau. I want to thank you all right now for coming to this press conference. In just a few minutes, we will be providing additional information in regards to the officer-involved shooting that occurred yesterday on Donaghy Drive. Before we get started, I just want to let you all know that at the end of the press conference, we'll have a time where we can accept just a few questions should you have any. Remember that this is an active and ongoing investigation, so there may be some questions that we cannot answer due to the fact that it is an ongoing investigation. We may not, like I said, we may not be able to answer the questions because it's an active ongoing investigation. The answers may be a detail to that ongoing investigation. With all that said, I'd like to introduce you to Chief Patrick Tessing, who will provide us with the additional information. Chief.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you all for coming out. Before we get started, I just want to emphasize the fact that a man lost his life in this incident. Regardless of the fact that he was a suspect in a crime, you know, this weighs heavy on our hearts because of the effect it has on his family and on our community as a whole, and all our officers that work here. So on June 25th, Saturday, at approximately 10:40 p.m., officers were called to an address on Donaghy Drive in reference to a domestic disturbance with a weapon. Prior to arrival on the scene, officers were made aware that at least one victim had been shot at. And so having that information, they arrived, they made contact, were able to get two victims out of the house. They attempted contact with the suspect, who was identified as Mr. Arlen Bates, 66 years old, of North Little Rock. Mr. Bates refused to talk to officers, basically shut the door and went inside. So the officers started the communication process, trying to make contact with him via PA system, via telephone. And this went on for several hours, and Mr. Bates refused to talk with us. So based on the information we had, he was armed with at least one firearm. He had committed felony offenses and then barricaded himself in the residence. The decision was made to shift to a tactical response. So around 4 a.m. that morning, officers from the North Little Rock Police Department Special Operations teams were called out. This consists of our SWAT team, our crisis negotiation team that has a embedded mental health professional with them, and then members of our special response team. They continued to attempt contact with Mr. Bates via PA, via telephone, and he refused to answer. So the decision was made to breach the front door and put a robot in with a camera in order to try to find Mr. Bates in the residence and open a line of communication. That attempt was unsuccessful. We could not locate Mr. Bates. So around 6 a.m., officers of the SWAT team entered the residence in an attempt to find Mr. Bates. They encountered him in a back bedroom. Canine Racky was brought in. Once they encountered Mr. Bates, he initiated an exchange of gunfire. Canine Racky was struck in the leg. Our SWAT officer was struck in the chest, and Mr. Bates was also struck by gunfire as well. And at that point, the officers of the SWAT team transitioned into a life-saving measures and provided medical aid to Mr. Bates until the paramedics on scene could get in and take over. But you know, ultimately, these were unsuccessful. So as you can see, this is the vest of the officer that went in and was struck by gunfire. He's okay. He had minor injuries to his chest area. He was treated at the scene and released. Canine Racky was not quite as fortunate. He caught one in the front leg, and that's probably going to be a career-ending injury for him. So we're getting updates as we go with the vet taking care of him. And so most likely he's going to be retired when all this is said and done. It's going to take a long time for him to heal up. And so if y'all have any questions, we can go ahead and ask.
Do you have a name for the officer who was hit?
We're not going to release that right now. This is still all under investigation, and so we're gonna hold off on that.
Is it fair to say without the Kevlar vest he was wearing that he would have been killed by that shot?
I'd say it was a high probability, yes. Yes.
The other individuals that were in the household at the time, are they family members?
1, 2 that we know of, yes. Yes.
And was this a long-time resident of that Lakewood neighborhood? Or?
You know, I don't know the answer to that. I can find out, but he had been there for some time. I just don't know for how long.
Any priors?
Not that I'm aware of, no, sir.
How many special operations officers went into the home, and the exchange of gunfire? I imagine K-9 Racky and the officer were both hit by the suspect.
I don't know exactly how many were deployed in there. Those are decisions that are made at the time based on, you know, the layout of the house and you know, the needs that they have. So I can't say exactly how many went in at this point. That we may be able to give you that later.
It says in the release that Mr. Bates had committed felony offenses with that firearm. So were those offenses committed during that kind of incident, or were they something prior?
I'm sorry, yeah, I should have told you all that. I had that written down and I just flew right over it. So he had 2 counts of aggravated assault on a family or household member and 1 count of domestic battery in the 3rd degree.
So was that from that same incident?
Yes, from that incident that night, yeah.
Did he have any felonies prior to this incident?
Not that we're aware of, no, sir.
Can you talk a little bit about the decision of having to go into the home, even though it ultimately led to the shootout, instead of prolonging the negotiation process?
Right, so the negotiation process can keep going and going and going and going. Domestic battery offenses are ones that we do not walk away from because that can lead to, you know, later on something happening to another victim. So that's something that, you know, that we will make an arrest on. And so that those actions are what drove our actions to go into the house and effect the arrest.
I'm sure this is still under investigation, but do we know what instigated the disturbance, altercation between the family members to start with?
No, sir, sure don't.
Do you know that Mr. Bates had a history of mental illness?
Not that we're aware of, no.
All right, that's all the time. Thank you so much.
Thank
Thank you
y'all.
guys for your questions. Thank you guys for your time again. If you have any further questions, please feel free to email those to our media relations email. I'm sure you all have that. Press releases have been disseminated for today. Again, thank you all for coming, and we really appreciate it.